Imagine being a sailor in the 13th century, standing on the deck of a creaking wooden ship, staring at the endless horizon, knowing you won't see land for months, and the only thing standing between you and starvation is a rock-hard piece of bread that could probably double as a weapon. That bread, believe it or not, was the medieval world's answer to long-term food storage, and the ingenious trick behind it wasn't refrigeration or chemicals. It was something far simpler and more brilliant. The secret was double baking, a preservation technique so effective that it kept bread edible not just for weeks, but for months, sometimes even years, and it all traces back to a method the Romans perfected centuries before the Middle Ages even began. The word biscuit itself comes from the medieval Latin biscoctus, meaning twice cooked, and that's exactly what medieval bakers did. They baked their bread, sliced it, and baked it again, systematically drawing out every last trace of moisture until what remained was a dense, shelf-stable cracker that could survive the dampest ship's hold or the longest military campaign. This wasn't your soft, fluffy loaf from the corner bakery. This was hardtack, also known as ship's biscuit, sea bread, or, less affectionately, molar breakers, and medieval sailors, soldiers, and travelers relied on it as their primary source of calories when fresh food simply wasn't an option. The process was deceptively simple. Bakers mixed flour, water, and sometimes a bit of salt into a stiff dough, shaped it into flat slabs, baked it once in a hot oven for about 30 minutes, then let it cool before slicing it into individual pieces and baking it again at a lower temperature to remove any remaining moisture. For the longest voyages, like those undertaken by Richard the Lionheart's Crusaders in the late 12th century, the bread was baked not just twice, but up to 4 times, ensuring it was bone-dry and virtually indestructible. Historical records suggest that King Richard's ships departed England in 1190 stocked with biscuit of muslin, a mixed grain version made from barley, rye, and bean flour. The brilliance of this technique lay in understanding something medieval people didn't have the scientific language for but knew instinctively. Bacteria, mold, and other microorganisms need water to survive. And by removing moisture through repeated baking, you create an environment where spoilage simply can't occur. This principle made twice-baked bread a staple not just at sea but across medieval Europe, where long winters, unreliable harvests, and the constant threat of war meant communities needed food that could be stored indefinitely without rotting. Medieval Italian bakers took this concept and refined it into something closer to what we'd recognize today as biscotti, mixing in almonds, pine nuts, and sometimes honey, then following the same twice-baked method to create a harder, longer-lasting product that Roman legions had eaten centuries earlier as bucellatum. According to some accounts, the Roman writer Pliny the Elder claimed such provisions would remain edible for centuries. And while that might be hyperbole, examples of hardtack baked in the mid-19th century still exist in museums today, technically still edible if you're brave enough to try. The medieval version wasn't always pleasant to eat. Sailors and soldiers often had to soak their hardtack in coffee, beer, soup, or even seawater just to make it soft enough to chew without breaking a tooth. And improper storage frequently led to infestations of weevils and other insects, earning the bread colorful nicknames like worm castles. But for all its drawbacks, twice-baked bread was a lifeline, providing essential calories, protein from the wheat flour, and the ability to sustain armies and navies through campaigns that would otherwise have been impossible. By the time of the Spanish Armada in 1588, English sailors were issued a daily ration of 1 pound of ship's biscuit along with a gallon of beer, and this remained standard practice well into the 19th century, when canned foods and eventually refrigeration finally began to replace the ancient preservation method. The technique spread far beyond Europe. German bakers developed zwieback, Jewish communities created mandelbrot, and Filipino cooks adapted the concept into bizcocho, each culture putting its own spin on the twice-baked principle. What's remarkable is that this medieval trick didn't rely on expensive spices, rare ingredients, or complex equipment. Any baker with an oven and a bit of patience could produce bread that would outlast fresh loaves by months, making it accessible to everyone from royal navies to peasant households preparing for winter. The perforations you sometimes see in hardtack weren't just decorative either. Medieval bakers discovered that punching holes in the dough before baking allowed moisture to escape more evenly. Today, when we dip our almond biscotti into coffee at a cafe or grab a pack of crackers from the pantry, we're benefiting from the same fundamental principle that kept medieval travelers alive. Remove the water and you remove the problem of spoilage. It's a reminder that some of the most effective solutions don't require modern technology, just observation, experimentation, and the willingness to bake something twice when once clearly wasn't enough.